For a lot of the pruning, I like using the secateurs, your little handheld pruners. And if you like a natural form in your shrubs, it's a great way of just making individual cuts. And that will keep it more free-flowing and not too sheared shaped. All of a sudden everything comes a box-shaped or a globe shape in your yard. For something like the barberry, this is a nice burgundy leaf barberry when it opens up. And a lot of times in landscapes, people want it to be more sheared, just like you would shear a little boxwood hedge and that sort of thing. And so for a job like that, instead of pruning with individual cuts, if you want to keep more natural, then I would take the secateurs and just make individual cuts on it. But if your goal is to get a nice sheared shape to it, that's when I would use the shears. And this is what we call shears, longer blade to them. And I prefer using these. I know when you have a large hedge, this might be a bit of work for you. But if you're using electric shears, you're basically getting two pieces of metal that are just rubbing together quickly, and it's ripping pieces off. So you're not getting that clean cut that we want to have. So the wounds don't heal as quickly, there's more dieback on the tips of the branches. But if you're wanting to make a nice uniform shape to it, that's when I would use the shears. And we talked about when we remove the terminal buds, that the other buds below get stimulated and then you get more branching. So that will form a nice dense look to it. One trick with the shears that I've learned over the years is usually we'll use them this way on, what we consider the right way up. But when you go to prune something, it becomes very awkward because when you hold them this way, the tip is always pointing upwards. But if we actually think about using our shears upside down, what we call upside down, when you hold it, the blades are going flat. So to create that nice uniform shape to it, it's much easier, it'll hug the plant better than holding them this way on, because then you'd have to keep changing your arm position to do that. And then to clean it up in the spring, you might have some little dead tips to it. So we're just going through and shearing the ends. With anything you're doing that with in deciduous shrubs, you also want to consider, we talked about removing a third of the oldest branches every year, and you still need to do that other pruning. You still need to be taking out any crossing branches, look for the dead branches, the disease, the damaged branches, and then the shearing would be the last step you go into. So you still need to keep that plant healthy. I read in a garden blog that there's a whole list of flowering shrubs that you never need to prune. And I really disagree with that fact because it just meant that they stay small and don't require a lot of pruning to keep in size. But you still have to do those first steps to maintain the health of the plant. So as this gets older, might be old stems that we're just taking out to encourage that new growth. Or again, because we're shearing and the plant's getting thicker, then it's going to thin out and all you're going to get is that ice cream cone shape again. But just laying the shears on it, once you've done all the other part of the pruning, and just making a nice uniform shape, makes a nicer job, and then you're not doing all those little cuts individually. I just want to introduce you to some of the tools that we use when we're pruning. So whether you're a novice gardener, you're just getting started, or an experienced gardener, these are kind of 4 tools that you should consider having in your shed. And the first ones are what we call secateurs. Most of us call them pruners, but anything that cuts a branch or a stem is a pruner. So we call these secateurs, and they're the little handheld ones. Usually where you want one that's bypass, where the 2 blades bypass each other. The ones that are anvil, meaning that the 2 blades butt up against each other, they kind of more crush the stem. So to get that nice clean cuts, you're wanting to use something that bypasses. So the 2 blades go over top of one another. And that's great for making small cuts, finer stems, and usually up to about 3/4 of an inch stem you can usually get if you've got good sharp pruners. And when you're looking for pruners, these I bought close to 30 years ago. And I've replaced the blade once. So some of the Felco pruners, you can get replacement parts, so you don't have to pay the $50, $60 for the pair of pruners again, you just buy the blade. But my dad always taught me, you buy good and you buy once. And so just don't buy the cheapest pair of pruners you come across. They're not going to do a good job for you, so it's worth the investment, and keep it 25 years. The next tool that's used more often in the garden as well is the shears. And they're a longer bladed one. These ones are a wavy edge sheared, so the blade actually has a bit of wave to them. Sometimes when you're cutting a stem, the stem will shoot out from your blades. So I like the wavy edge ones because the wave of them, as the blades come together, catches those stems in, and you get a nice clean cut. Lots of different brands in that out there. But again, buy good quality and they'll last for a long, long time for you. So if we're shearing or shaping something, doing a hedge type of idea, the shears is the tool that you need to use. I'm not a big proponent of using electric shears. The electric shears are great for big, I know if you have a privet hedge that's 100 feet long, that's probably the way to go. But it really doesn't give a clean cut. It rips the pieces apart. You get tearing of bark down the stems. It's those wound areas that you're going to get diseases and insects come into. So if you can get away with the shears without using electric shears, a much better job will be done with them. Kind of the next tool on the size up, if you're doing larger stems, so if you're looking at stems 1 inch, 2 inches in diameter, if you've got some trees that you'll be pruning and that, these are what we call loppers. And we talked about bypass, where the two blades bypass each other. This is what we call anvil loppers. And the two blades actually butt up against each other. So it does, usually the bypass won't cut through that thicker stem. So for thicker stems, I like using the anvil ones. This pair in particular is when they're ratchet. So instead of using all your arm muscle to get through the stem, you just pump the handle and the blades come closer and closer together. And you can cut through 2-inch pieces with relatively no effort. So it might be something that you want to look at. In the pruners, there's also ones that have extendable handles. So if you need to reach in further or a little vertically challenged like I am, it's great to have that extra handle length that you can either shorten or lengthen as you require. So that would be the next, if you're going into larger sizes of stems for pruning. And the next one is a pruning saw. And you can usually pick them up under $30, not a real expensive item. I like the folding ones just because they're easier to keep clean and doesn't take up as much space, but they just unfold. And there'll be a very coarse tooth that goes through the wood very nice. So if you're looking at branches more than 2 inches in diameter, the pruning saw might be needed. If you have fruit trees on your property, always doing a lot of pruning, larger stems, again, for $30, you can get a good pruning saw. For caring for your tools, definitely in the spring before you get started with your pruning, you just want to take either steel wool or a pot scrubber of some sorts and just go over the blades, just rubbing back and forth. You'll actually see the blades shine up. Before you clean them, you'll find that they're very rough, maybe sticky if you've been pruning some evergreens. So just doing a good cleanup with them with a steel wool will get most of that off. If they rusted a bit over the winter, that cleans that off as well. And so just something you can do every spring, and even if you've been doing a lot of pruning, before you put them away again, just give them a good cleaning. And then sharpening tools, there's little sharpeners that you can get. This is one that we carry here, very simple to use. And we have different video on sharpening them that you can watch or come in and pick up a little sharpener. But you're just running it along the outside of the blades. So these shears are bypass. So you don't want to do the two blade areas that are touching each other. You want to do the outsides. And you'll find a bevel edge there, whether it's your secateurs or your shears. And you just run this on the same angle, back and forth across it, and that will sharpen your blades. But if you're not getting a clean cut through the stems, the stem is just bending on you, or even with your pruners, if you're not hearing that sound of the two blades rubbing together, if you look through it and you can see a lot of air between the blades, you're not getting a good cut onto them. So just a simple way of taking care of them. Even in the wintertime, before you store your tools, a great thing just to keep the rust from forming on them is just get a bucket or pot, put some sand in it with some vegetable oil, and just dip the pruning blades down into the sand. And the sand will help the oil adhere to the blades, and just hang them up in a dry place for the wintertime. Just add a bit of oil on the blades will stop them from rusting over winter. And then come spring, just clean that off and you're ready to go.